I still remember the moment my marriage ended, not with a face-to-face confrontation, not with an emotional argument, but with a single, careless text message. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Ha ha. I was in the middle of helping a customer at Luxmode, my boutique, when my phone buzzed. I read the message, absorbing the words as I carefully wrapped a silk scarf in silver tissue paper. My hands didn't shake. My voice remained steady as I thanked Mrs. Patterson for her purchase. The only outward sign that my husband of 12 years had just burned our marriage to the ground was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Patterson walked out the door before responding, "Good luck." That was all. No pleading, no anger. Just 2 words. Lucas probably imagined me devastated, crushed by his betrayal, drowning in heartbreak. I could picture him smirking at his phone, convinced he'd won some sort of twisted game. But what he didn't know, what he never suspected, was that I had seen this coming for months. The late nights at the office that never reflected in his paycheck. The sudden obsession with the gym, new clothes, and anti-aging serums. The password changes on his phone. I had been watching, waiting, preparing. 3 months earlier, I found a receipt for a fancy dinner for 2, on a night he claimed to be working late. That same evening, I opened a separate bank account at another bank. A week later, when Lucas suggested we combine our accounts to simplify things, I smiled, agreed, and quietly moved every penny of my personal savings into the new account. The joint account he so proudly emptied contained just enough to keep up appearances. 2 months' worth of regular deposits, nothing more. The real money? Safe and untouched. I wasn't just prepared financially, I had receipts. A year's worth of suspicious transactions. Hotel charges, dinners, cash withdrawals that didn't match his schedule. I had even consulted my lawyer. Months before Lucas thought he had the upper hand. Another text came in. "Don't bother begging. Brianna and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." Brianna, the new receptionist at his office. I had met her at the company Christmas party, young, eager, laughing a little too loudly at Lucas's jokes. I noticed the way she touched his arm, the way he straightened his posture when she was around. She was young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to believe she was special. I didn't respond to his message. Instead, I called my lawyer. "It's time," I said. "He just made his move." "The papers are ready," she replied. "I'll file them first thing tomorrow." "Do you want me to have him served in Miami?" I smiled, thinking of how smug he must be feeling, how certain he was that he had pulled off the perfect escape. "No rush," I said. "Let him think he's won first." Lucas wasn't done gloating. My phone buzzed again. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." My little shop. The boutique I had built from nothing. The one that generated more income than his middle management salary ever had. The business whose profits I had intentionally kept separate from our marriage. I set my phone down, already picturing the certified legal letters that would be waiting for him in Miami. Let him enjoy his victory lap. His reality check was on its way. That evening I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive kind I had been saving for a special occasion. This felt appropriate. While I organized the paperwork for my lawyer, I came across our wedding album. Lucas had looked different back then. Youthful, confident. In the years since, his midlife crisis had turned him into a caricature of himself. The too tight designer shirts that emphasized his softening middle. The forced use of slang that made him sound ridiculous. The desperate attempts to connect with the 20-somethings at his office. I flipped through the album slowly, then set it aside. I didn't need it anymore. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "I've been planning this for months. Brianna understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your age." My fingers hovered over the screen before I decided against replying. Instead, I took screenshots, every word, every arrogant, self-satisfied statement, every admission of premeditated fraud. Lucas thought he was in control. Lucas thought he was winning. He had no idea he was digging his own grave. The next text made me laugh out loud. "BTW, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. LOL. I didn't hesitate. I called the credit card company. Mrs. Carter speaking. "I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately." The representative's voice was crisp and professional. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami, a hotel reservation at the Royal Palm, and I need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of the fraud? Yes. In fact, I have text messages from my husband admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our bank account. I'll be happy to forward them. I heard a slight pause on the other end of the line. Then, a hint of satisfaction in the rep's voice. Thank you, ma'am. The charges will be reversed immediately. The next morning, Lucas and Brianna would show up at the airport and find their flights canceled, their hotel reservation voided. And me? I would wake up in my house, in my life, drinking my morning coffee, knowing that Lucas had just crashed headfirst into his first real consequence. And it was only the beginning. Lucas was probably feeling invincible that night, dreaming of sun-soaked beaches, sipping overpriced cocktails with Brianna on his arm, completely unaware that the very foundation of his escape plan was crumbling beneath him. I, on the other hand, slept soundly. The next morning, while Lucas and his barely out-of-college girlfriend were likely arguing with a confused airline agent, I started my day as usual. I brewed my coffee, took my time getting dressed, and unlocked the doors to Lux mode, ready for another profitable day. At precisely noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, the tone was different. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. I didn't. Instead, I turned off notifications, slid my phone into my desk drawer, and focused on unpacking a new shipment of designer handbags. Friday was always a busy day at the boutique, and unlike Lucas, I had actual responsibilities. By mid-afternoon, his mother called. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to the message as I sipped my tea. Ava dear, Lucas told us everything. How you've been controlling, how you pushed him away, and now you're being spiteful. He says you're trying to ruin his fresh start. I know things ended badly, but can't you be civil about this? I put the call on speaker while adjusting the store's window display. When I called her back, her voice was clipped but expectant, like she was waiting for my tearful admission that she'd been right about me all along. Barbara, I said smoothly, did Lucas mention that he emptied our joint bank account before leaving? Or that he booked a romantic vacation on our shared credit card? Silence. Then, a hesitant, well, he said you left him no choice, that you'd been cold and distant. I actually laughed. Barbara, I have the texts. Would you like me to read them to you? Maybe the one where he bragged about taking my money? Or the one where he mocked my age? Another pause. This one longer. He did seem a bit cruel, she admitted. I told him that text was inappropriate. Inappropriate? That was one way to describe it. I appreciate the call, Barbara, but I think it's best if we end this conversation here, I said. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Lucas's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Goodbye, Barbara. I hung up and went back to work, letting the weight of her silence sink in. By the weekend, word had spread fast. Lucas and Brianna were stuck at a budget motel near the airport, their dream Miami getaway reduced to thin walls, bad cable, and scratchy polyester sheets. His personal credit cards, the ones he hadn't maxed out months ago, were now their only financial lifeline. His sister, Olivia, called me on Sunday, her voice unusually cautious. Ava, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for believing him, for everything. I didn't realize how badly he'd screwed up. What changed? He called our parents for money, she admitted. Told them he was stranded because you locked him out of your accounts. When I asked why he needed money if he had a brand new life in Miami, he got defensive. So I asked about the texts. I let the silence drag on. I'm guessing he didn't have a good answer, I finally said. Not really. He just blamed you for not understanding him, for forcing him into this situation. She hesitated. I think my mom still wants to believe him, but she's embarrassed. He keeps calling, and she's running out of excuses not to pick up. Good. Let her sit with that. By Monday morning, Lucas was served with divorce papers at the motel he'd been forced to downgrade to. His response? A string of increasingly frantic texts. We don't have to do this, Ava. We can talk like adults. You're making a mistake. This is vindictive and calculated. I smiled at that one. Calculated? Absolutely. At 10 a.m., my lawyer called. The emergency hearing is set for Friday. Given his own admission of draining the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a very strong position. Has he been served yet? This morning. At the motel. And speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media has been an excellent source of evidence. Oh? She's been posting non-stop about their adventure, my lawyer said, clearly amused. Including complaints about how they had to move out of their nice hotel because some woman ruined their trip. I laughed. Of course Brianna hadn't realized who she was dealing with. Make sure to screenshot everything, I said. Let's make sure this case is airtight. That week, Lucas's arrogance started to crack. By Wednesday, his texts turned desperate. Ava, we can work this out. I made mistakes but I never meant to hurt you. Do you really want to fight me over everything? You know I deserve part of the boutique. It wouldn't even exist without me. That one almost made me choke on my tea. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a single note. Add this to the file. Lucas had never invested a dime in Lux Mode. If anything, he had resented it, complaining about my long hours, mocking it as my little hobby. And now? Now, he was desperate enough to claim half of it. He had no idea what was coming. By Friday, Lucas arrived in court, looking unrecognizable. The designer clothes that once screamed midlife crisis had been traded for a cheap blazer and nervous sweat. Brianna was nowhere to be seen. My lawyer methodically presented our case. Lucas's own texts proving he'd stolen from our account. His fraudulent use of our joint credit card. The airtight financial separation of my business, ensuring he had no claim to it. His lawyer tried to argue that I had been calculated and cruel. You mean prudent? My lawyer countered smoothly. My client simply protected herself. That's not vindictive. That's smart business. The judge wasn't amused by Lucas's antics. You emptied a shared account and used a joint credit card to fund a personal trip. Now you want to claim rights to a business you never invested in? Lucas fidgeted in his chair. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud? The judge interrupted. I watched as reality crashed into him. Lucas had thought he was winning. Now, he finally realized he had already lost. Lucas had walked into the courtroom expecting a negotiation, as if we were two civil adults discussing a fair division of assets. He thought he could argue his way into my business, claim some financial leverage, maybe even manipulate the judge with a sad story about how I'd been cold and distant. What he got instead was a legal beatdown. The moment the judge declared all joint assets frozen, Lucas's entire escape plan collapsed. His posture slumped, his jaw clenched, and for the first time since that smug little text message, I watched him finally understand the depth of his mistake. But that money's gone, he protested. The judge barely glanced at him. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The final ruling was swift and merciless. Lucas was ordered to return the funds he stole. He had no claim to my boutique, my home, or any of my personal assets. His fraudulent use of our joint credit card was officially noted, setting the stage for further legal consequences. By the time we stepped outside the courthouse, Lucas looked defeated. His lawyer packing up his briefcase with the grim efficiency of a man who knew he'd just lost a hopeless case. I didn't say anything as I walked past Lucas, but I heard him muttering to himself, hands shoved in his pockets, clearly still trying to process how his perfect escape plan had backfired so completely. And then, as I was nearly to my car, he called after me. You planned this all along, didn't you? His voice was hoarse, resentful. You knew this would happen. I turned, giving him a long, measured look before replying. No, Lucas, I just paid attention. His mother, Barbara, was waiting by the curb, arms crossed tightly over her chest. As he approached, she shook her head. Honestly, Lucas, what were you thinking? A 20-year-old, emptying bank accounts, sending those ridiculous texts? I didn't bother staying to listen. There was nothing left to say. Lucas had tried to burn my life down. Instead, he had only succeeded in setting himself on fire. Over the next few weeks, Lucas's life unraveled at an astonishing speed. Brianna dumped him within days of the court ruling. She had planned for a carefree Miami escape, not a financial train wreck. Apparently, she wasn't as devoted as he'd thought. His credit cards were maxed out, and with his accounts frozen, he was forced to move back in with his parents. His job prospects took a hit. The HR department at Horizon Consulting had formally reprimanded him for dating a subordinate. That promotion he had been expecting? Given to someone else. His sister Olivia called me a week later, her voice filled with disbelief. "I can't believe he actually thought he was going to get half of Lux Mode," she said. "Lucas never understood what I built," I replied simply. "He was too busy trying to feel important." "Well, it's all caught up to him now," she said, her tone almost bitter. "I stopped answering his calls. My mom's barely speaking to him. And Brianna? She's already moved on." I wasn't surprised. Brianna had fallen for the fantasy of Lucas, the successful middle-aged man with a plan. But once she saw the reality, a man in crippling debt, unemployed, and living with his parents at 45, she cut ties without hesitation. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Meanwhile, my life flourished in ways Lucas could never have imagined. Lux Mode opened its second location, with plans for a third already in motion. Local business magazines featured my story, not as the scorned wife, but as a savvy entrepreneur who had outmaneuvered a financial predator. Women in business began seeking my advice, wanting to know how to protect their assets, separate finances, and avoid men like Lucas. One afternoon, a familiar name popped up in my store's online orders. Brianna. I had to read it twice just to make sure. But there it was, her billing address was new, her name was listed alone, and her order wasn't cheap. A week later she walked into my boutique. She looked different. Not in the way I expected. She wasn't the confident head-over-heels girl from Lucas's office Christmas party. She looked humbled, almost embarrassed. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly, clutching her purse. "I believed everything he told me, that you were cold, controlling, that you never supported him. And then," she exhaled, shaking her head. "Then I watched him try the same manipulation on me." I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Big plans? No way to fund them?" Her laugh was short and self-deprecating. "Exactly. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off. Once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency finally took off." I almost felt bad for her. She had fallen for the same illusion I had, just at a different stage of Lucas's decline. "I'm dating someone my own age now," she added after a moment. "We don't have much, but we're building something real. It's not about escapes anymore." I gave her a small nod. "Good. That's the difference between growth and running away." She left, and my assistant manager leaned in wide-eyed. "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I said, turning back to my inventory list. "Just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." 5 years after Lucas's smug little text, my boutique had grown into a successful chain, with locations across multiple cities. At the 5-year anniversary event for Lux Mode, a surprise guest arrived, Barbara. She approached after the speeches were done, holding a shopping bag from my store. "I saw Lucas yesterday," she said hesitantly. I waited. "He still talks about his glory days," she continued, shaking her head. "Still complains about the judge, still blames everyone else. He doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." I nodded, but I didn't feel anything, not anger, not triumph. Lucas was stuck in the past. I had moved on, built something real, and never looked back. As I returned to my office, my eyes landed on the framed screenshot hanging above my desk, the last text Lucas had ever sent me before I blocked his number. "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Below it, I had mounted my Businesswoman of the Year award. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better.